Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is 11th webinar of Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, which is a community of energy and evaluation professionals in the Asia Pacific region. My name is Nazir. I work as a coordinator with Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, and I'll be your host today. This webinar is being organized as part of the GLOCAL Evaluation Week, which is organized by the Global Evaluation Initiative along with other partners. This is a unique knowledge sharing event that aims to inspire and energize the global movement at the individual and organizational level who value the power of evidence to improve people's life. Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific is proud to be a part of this movement and continue spotlighting the importance of evaluation for improving energy policies and programs. Before we formally begin, may I invite you to kindly introduce yourself in the chat. If you can keep yourself muted, thank you. Yeah, please kindly introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name, country, and organization. And fun question, I would say, if you could power your house with any unusual energy source, what would it be? For me, I would say it would be the coffee beans, considering my coffee addiction. I feel like, that could lead to a lot of sustainable energy sources. So we'll be happy to hear what exactly, would be your unusual energy source. I would like to kindly share with you session guidelines. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, and we assume that by attending and participating, you give us your consent to for this to happen. But if you have any concern, please feel free to reach out to us. Please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking, but you can switch on your cameras for better engagement. I'd like to encourage you to use the chat box for questions and comments. The speakers will either respond to the questions directly in the chat, or we also have a dedicated question and answer and discussion session at the end. Please provide feedback at the end of the session. I'll be sharing a brief survey form with you. We will be uploading the
Okay, I think Nazir is having some bandwidth problems there, so I'll carry on. I think we were just getting into showing you what the run sheet's going to be like for today. So yes, I will perhaps pick up a little bit more early than expected to give us a bit of context setting, and then we'll move into presentations by our two esteemed guests, Michael Williamson from UNSCAP and Divya Gur from Council on Energy, Environment and Water in India. Then we're going to have about 20 minutes for questions. So we encourage you to put your questions into the chat so that we can pick them up, or you're very welcome to raise your hand and deliver your question verbally. That would be very welcome. And then we'll finish with some concluding comments and signals about what's coming next. So that's my turn. So I'm just going to have to change presentations quickly, everybody, and then we'll move on. Bear with us. Sometimes the bandwidth is not what we would like it to be. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen there. So we'll get straight into it. So I wanted to start off by giving you a little bit of a sense of who we are at Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific. We're really happy to be partnering with the GLOCAL, the Global Evaluation Initiative, this time. But we're an organization that is focused on energy evaluation. We've been existing since 2018, as you can see here. And we are the regional branch of an organization that started in the US in the 80s. which was the International Energy Policies and Programs Evaluation Conference. Extended into Europe subsequently, and since 2018 we've been operating here under the new name of Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific. So essentially we're a community supporting evaluation of energy policies and programs in our region, obviously, and our region spans from Pakistan all the way to New Zealand, some 30 countries in between. I should say that I am from New Zealand and Nazir is from Pakistan, so we're quite well represented the whole span today. So our mission is to take a leadership role in expanding practice of evaluation in the energy sector. So clean energy programs are our focus. Obviously that primarily includes energy efficiency and renewable energy programs, as well as energy access. And essentially what we do is we're bringing people together. We're creating a network so that anyone who's interested in energy evaluation across our region, and that includes evaluators, academics, through to policymakers and decision makers, that those people have an opportunity to connect, to learn more about what's going on in the energy evaluation space and use the outputs of the rich body of work that's taking place in the region. So fostering a network, enabling people to connect and meet, and also the opportunity to share their work. So we have a database of resources on our website, of papers and publications that have been generated through all of our events. So those are free to access for anybody looking for that kind of resource. And obviously we hold webinars like this one, where we try to give our members opportunities to share their work as widely as possible and generate discussion about new emerging topics, like the evaluation of the broader evaluation of impacts, particularly in social and economic development. So we also hold events. We've had several in-person conferences, although that was interrupted by COVID. We've had 2 conferences in Bangkok and one that got stalled in Indonesia. We're now looking at organising our next in-person event towards the end of the year in October. So make sure you're connected to our newsletter to hear news about that. And just quickly, a little bit more of a deep dive on what we do at EEAP. So as I said, it's all about networking and collaboration. So we engage with a very diverse range of stakeholders, essentially about promoting this work in our region and building capacity. So capacity building is there also. So that's really a key part of what we do, and we have our members have participated in capacity building workshops across the region. Data-driven decision making is essentially what we're all about. We're really trying to support robust policy decisions that are evidence-based, that are data-driven, and obviously that is the value of evaluation and monitoring that we can bring to the clean energy decision-making process. So without further ado, I will take us into the topic of today's discussion, which is transforming the way we measure clean energy transitions. So this is a very exciting emerging topic and critically important. So we know that the future energy system is going to be more affordable, it's going to be cleaner and more resilient. That's where we want to head, but we have to acknowledge that we are actually working with an energy system that is currently plagued with inequities. We're facing a lot of challenges. We've got 50 million people lacking access to electricity. We've got 2 million people without access to clean cooking and fuels. Millions of people with connections are still struggling to afford energy. Essentially, across the board, we're seeing that low-income groups continue to be locked out of the transition for various reasons, in particular access to capital for that large and upfront investment that clean energy technology represents. And we can see, and Michael Williamson from UNESCAP is going to talk to us about this, that the energy transition is tracking forward, but not at the pace that we need it to. So we have an issue that we believe can be supported strongly by better monitoring and evaluation of programs. Because successful transitions are not just about finding the cheapest pathway, they're actually, for it to be successful, we need not only a fast transition, but a fair and affordable transition. So policies need to be designed carefully so that we can maximize fairness and affordability and ensure that the benefits that are available are going to be accessed by everyone. So evidence is the key to that. Good policy making requires good evidence. So that's what we're all about here, obviously, at EEAP. And I'm sure you all appreciate that being here today, part of the Global Evaluation Initiative. So we're advocating today for moving beyond measuring the traditional measures, so kilowatt hours saved or installed. Obviously, carbon savings are a new metric that's critically important in the transition. And people connected, it's also critical as we move towards our SDG 7 goals. But actually, there's a whole range of wider social and economic benefits that are critical to making sure that this transition is successful, and also critical to generating the support from the public so that the transition can move faster. So if people aren't seeing the benefits, the projects aren't going to get the support and aren't going to move at pace. And that's what we're seeing around the world, including in the Asia-Pacific region. So today we want to talk about how we might begin to value those wider benefits, or multiple benefits as they were coined by the International Energy Agency. And we've got a list here of some of those. So cleaner air and water, better housing, greater comfort in those houses, more time, productive time, and certainly that links to gender equality when we're talking about clean cooking, better jobs, local economic growth, as well as macroeconomic growth, and then community participation, empowerment, and improved health and well-being. So we're going to hear from Divya later, who's going to tell us about an example of a project where they've measured many of those indicators, which is really exciting. And hopefully we'll be able to have a discussion with you all about other examples where that's happening. I just wanted, before I hand over to Michael, I wanted to share a few bits of exciting work that are happening in this space, and certainly there are others, and it'd be great if people could put those into the chat as we go through, if there's any other bits of work that you'd like to direct people to. So the capturing of the multiple benefits of energy efficiency is a little bit outdated now, but it was a really important piece of work that the IEA did on looking at the evidence for a broad range of benefits. But they have just recently, last week, released a new report. And I think I saw participants from the IEA on the list, so feel free during the discussion to jump in if you'd like to say anything about that. But strategies for affordable and fair clean energy transitions. It's a really exciting new bit of groundbreaking analysis in this space. Also really pleased to see SEA for All has recently published an evidence gap map, which is right on target for us as evaluators, looking at what the evidence base is like around SDG 7 and what they, and I'll put, I think Nazir will put a link in the chat if he's manages to rejoin, to direct you to those. But certainly while they found a large evidence base, there are huge evidence gaps. So that's what we want to do in our network, is really foster this type of work to fill those gaps. So without holding us up any longer, let's move on to the topic of our speakers. So we're going to be, today we really want to raise ambition. We're really trying to push ourselves and each other to go outside our comfort zone in terms of what we're used to measuring. And I've got two fabulous speakers who are going to give us a bit of context around the space that we're working in and where we're at now, and then an example of a very specific project that has attempted this and very successfully. So I'll introduce Michael Williamson from UNESCAP. Michael is the section chief of the energy division in the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Michael works on the regional cooperation for sustainable energy access across ESCAP's 53 member countries on intergovernmental cooperation, technical assistance, and knowledge building. Prior to this, Michael was the acting director of ESCAP's sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia. So he knows the region very well. And before that, he was also chief of staff to the executive secretary of ESCAP in Bangkok. He began his UN career in India in 2013, and he has over 25 years of experience, covers the private sector, government, international organizations, always with a focus on sustainable development, energy, technology, and climate change. So Michael is Australian. He previously worked for the state and federal government on climate change, sustainability, and energy policy. So Michael is going to provide us some really important context around the latest results on how we're tracking towards achieving our objectives under SDG 7. He'll share some insights at that high level about what we know so far, and he's going to inspire us with some of the opportunities he's seeing for how we can dive into deeper evaluation of some of these broader impacts of the energy transition. So Michael, I'll hand over to you now. I'll stop screen sharing and you can take the floor.
Thank you so much, Nina, and thanks for the invite. Thanks especially to you and Nazir and to Ed for the opportunity to join you and everybody else on this webinar. I think it's a really useful opportunity to sit back from the day-to-day work and think very deeply about the questions that you've posed. And I know for me, it's been helpful just to try and reflect a little bit on the issues that you posed. And in fact, the icebreaker posed by Nazir was the perfect one, because when he asked that question, it actually brought in the issue of co-benefits. So when he asked the question, what energy source would you use to power your home? I said the invasive plant species, because when you convert those to bioenergy, you're actually solving the biodiversity impacts and the challenges faced by that with a business model centered on renewable energy. So perfect example with through the icebreaker. It's really great for us to be able to dissect these questions together. And I think in my presentation, I perhaps don't have so many answers. Probably I raise more questions than answers, but that's really important. You should always be suspicious of somebody who tells you they have all the answers, because all of us, I think, are on this learning journey and we're trying to raise questions and together answer those questions. So I think in my PowerPoint presentation, that's maybe the approach that I will take. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see it shortly once I put it on full screen. Just 1 second. Okay. So just checking you can see that in full screen. Okay, fantastic.
Yes,
so a little bit about ESCAP. Thank you so much. So ESCAP, you may or may not know about ESCAP, but it's one of 5 UN regional commissions. And obviously, we cover the largest region, which is Asia Pacific. We have 53 member states. And really, our work is completely cross-sectoral. We cover all aspects of sustainable development, with a particular focus on the SDGs and indeed on transboundary challenges. And most of our work is centered around the 17 SDGs. In the case of our division, of course, we focus on energy, which is SDG 7. And we really feel that Asia Pacific, as I'm sure you feel the same way, is, I guess, the center of so many global issues in terms of energy consumption, of greenhouse gas emissions. So many of the solutions to the entire global challenges will be found in the Asia Pacific region. So just a quick outline. I think first of all, I'll take you on a quick journey through the SDG 7 targets to really paint a picture of how we are progressing against these targets. And Nina, in her introduction, talked a bit about the global picture. So hopefully I'll zero down to the Asia Pacific progress against many of those targets and indicators. And then secondly, talk about when we measure progress, what are the uncertainties and challenges in measuring SDG 7 progress? And lastly, to talk really about one of the central themes of today, which is how do we progress these multiple agendas? We know that sustainable energy has many co-benefits. It's interlinked with so many other objectives that we're trying to progress, but how do we measure this? This is the real challenge. So to start with, let's look at where we are on SDG 7 across the Asia Pacific. And I'm drawing data here from ESCAP's data portal. We have the Asia Pacific Energy Data Portal, which provides us information. But in terms of access to energy, we have 2 major forms, of course, access to electricity and access to clean cooking, and 2 very different pictures. Access to electricity is progressing very well, and in fact, it's been the focus of many policy efforts as the very visible form of progress. When you have electricity in your house, everybody can see the light. We have 98.6% overall, and indeed, I would say that many of the remaining challenges don't really relate to whether you have electricity or not, but what is the quality of that electricity? Does it go off for 10 hours a day? Do the lights flicker? Is the voltage too low? So we need to sort of go beyond the very simplistic indicator of a yes or no answer to that. In terms of clean cooking, unfortunately, it's a much more depressing picture. And at ESCAP, we're doing a lot of work in this direction to try and promote clean cooking. But we have about 74% access across the entire region. And you can see that if you project that line forwards to 2030, we're going to miss that target by a large margin unless something changes. And so when we look at access to electricity, when we break down the data, we can see that just 3 countries, the top 3 countries in that picture of people without access is about 65% of the challenge. So if we were to focus our efforts on those 3 countries, we would probably make a big dent in this challenge. But 53 million people is not a large number, and all of these countries are working very decisively towards that, and there's a very good chance we'll meet this target. But in terms of clean cooking, as I mentioned, 1.2 billion people, many of those in rural areas, they're not progressing quickly enough on clean cooking, and there are a whole host of reasons behind that, which I won't go into. But one interesting observation from the data, and really referring back to the curve I showed you before, if you look at the urban versus rural, so the urban is the top line, it's rather flat at the top, and that's telling us that the progress is very slow in the urban areas, which is probably due to a large number of people in informal settlements who seem to have dropped out of sight, dropped out of visibility, and that's an area for us to focus on. In terms of renewables, we have an interesting picture of, I guess, a U-shaped curve across the Asia Pacific, where 20 years ago, we had a lot smaller economies, a lot lower energy consumption, and a fairly large share of hydropower and traditional biomass. Over time, that share of renewables has dropped for 2 reasons. Really because we haven't built hydro quickly enough or new renewables quickly enough while energy demand has grown. At the same time, the traditional biomass has come out of the equation as people have moved to cities and villages have modernized. But now we're in the upscale, we're at the upswing. We are building more wind and solar and more hydro, and hopefully becoming more energy efficient, which will push up the renewable energy share. So we do need a big push of scale up to renewables to 2030 to get to that substantial share. And indeed, the COP28 outcome, countries have committed to triple their renewable energy capacity by 2030. So the last indicator is energy efficiency, and in many times energy efficiency drops out of the conversation. It's not focused on sufficiently because it's kind of invisible, but it's a really important element of the entire climate change response and indeed of SDG 7, because as we improve energy efficiency, not only do we make business more productive and save costs to consumers, we actually artificially push up the share of renewables. So if you imagine this pie of energy consumption, as that pie grows, the renewable energy struggles to take that share. But if we can actually manage energy demand growth, we actually accelerate the rate at which renewables take a bigger share. And as you can see, looking at the different time periods since 1990, we have different phases where energy efficiency has improved from 1990 to 2010, a big jump from 2010 to 2015, but then it's slackened off in the second half of the last decade. We haven't seen the big improvement that we would hope. And there's many reasons behind of that, some of which we know and some of which perhaps we don't know. But if we're to meet the targets of SDG 7, we really need to pick up the pace. So because of all of this lost time and progress, we would need an annual improvement rate of 3.4% between now and the end of the decade. And if we talk about net zero by 2050, we would be looking at an annual improvement of 4.3%. So this really implies a root and branch rethinking of our energy systems to make them much more energy efficient. So again, one of the limitations that we're facing here is we measure energy efficiency by a very weird means. Perhaps I shouldn't say weird, but we have an indicator called energy intensity, and we're measuring the change in energy intensity, the decrease. So if we use less energy to produce $1 of GDP, we're getting better at energy efficiency. Unfortunately, there's a whole range of other dynamics which are captured in that number that don't relate to energy efficiency. It can be due to the changing structure of the economy. It can be to changing patterns of migrant labor forces, for example. COVID-19 had a big impact on the energy intensity numbers for countries because migrant workers stopped remitting the money. That decreased the GDP and artificially increased the energy intensity. So you have some odd effects. We're stuck with this proxy. We can't do anything about it, but we should recognize that beneath the surface of the water, there's a lot going on. So let me turn to the second part of the story. What are the uncertainties and challenges in measuring SDG 7 progress? I've showed you all these wonderful numbers, but what are the factors that make these numbers maybe a little bit less rock solid than we would hope? I think the first one is that we have this lag in obtaining the energy data. There's a big process to verify and check all of this data, put it in the right formats. So we're about to get data for 2022. And of course, we're now mid-2024. So it's a bit like driving a car, and instead of looking through the windshield, you're looking in the rear vision mirror 2 years behind you. This is definitely a challenge. I know that there are other data sets by IRENA and others on different renewables and so forth, which are much more up to date. But the official SDG 7 data custodian agency takes some time to be published. When we look at energy access, this is really survey data. And one thing that I've noticed is that when we get the numbers through for each year with new data on clean cooking and access to electricity, sometimes the numbers from the previous time series shift. I'm not quite sure how this recalculation happens and why it happens. But if you've constructed a narrative about a particular country, how it's improving or disimproving, that narrative can change if the data changes. So this is another slightly tricky thing. The third point is that when we talk about a region, we talk about the Asia-Pacific region, 53 countries. If we talk about a regional average for energy efficiency, for example, it's a little bit meaningless because Japan is moving in a different direction to Fiji. Kazakhstan is doing different things to Mongolia. There are different dynamics. So we shouldn't do too much regional aggregation. If we want to really understand what's happening, we need to, for example, look at the small island states. How is their energy efficiency changing or regressing? Similarly with renewables, we need to look very carefully and not lean too much on these regional averages. Another point that comes to mind is that how we class renewable energy, because we have this thing called traditional biomass, which I showed in the earlier chart, has been very much in use 20, 30 years ago. It's now decreasing. So do we consider that traditional biomass to be renewable? Where does it come from? How is it harvested? Is it sustainable? There's a lot of questions around that. So the SDG 7 target language is quiet on that issue, and different agencies have different ways of interpreting it. The last point I think I've already covered about the proxy indicator for energy efficiency. We have a range of dynamics within the economy. I know in my own country, Australia, our energy intensity is probably decreasing more to the fact that we're losing manufacturing and doing more in the services sector. And when you think about it, if you're smelting iron ore, making cars, or doing heavy industry, pouring concrete, this produces a lot of emissions for GDP. But if you're doing IT, banking, consultancy, this produces a lot of GDP, but doesn't require much emissions. So these structural changes often are what's at play. And so we need to kind of dig a little bit deeper when we look at energy efficiency performance of countries. So let me go to the final chapter of the story. When we think about how energy is interlinked with the other sectors, how do we acknowledge this? How do we measure it? And maybe can we think a little bit more deeply about when we're giving policy advice or constructing narratives about different policy prescriptions, how can we link energy to other sectors? And maybe the best way to start thinking about this is that SDG 7, it's my favorite SDG, I must confess. I think it's wonderful, but I might be biased. but I think it really captures three separate ideas. And I mean, I think if you're trying to explain this to a classroom of students, this is how I would do it. I would say that, you know, the first thing is about energy justice. Many people on this planet don't have access to the same types of energy that we do. We wake up in the morning, we can have our hot breakfast, we're sheltered from the wind and the rain or the heat. We use modern energy. Many of our fellow citizens don't have this, so we need energy justice. Everybody needs electricity, we need clean cooking. Once we provide that, we have better health outcomes, we have economic opportunities for people to climb the income ladder, we have poverty reduction. So that's the first part. The second part is really about energy efficiency. We need to make the best possible use of energy. We need to be as efficient as possible. That's about conserving valuable resources. It's about reducing the harmful impacts when we burn those fossil fuels. And really, it's about intergenerational equity. Why would we waste all of these resources, be it natural gas or coal, when future generations might have more intelligent ways to use them? So that's the second, it's about efficiency. And the third is about renewables. So renewable energy is all around us. Why not use it? We need to use this more to combat climate change, but for other reasons too. Renewables have a direct impact on energy efficiency because there's less wastage compared to thermal power generation. We can build social welfare. So people, if they access renewable energy at small scales in villages and in homes, it improves people's welfare. So there's many reasons to use renewables, but principally it's about climate change because renewables are the central plank in that climate change challenge. And so therefore, given all of that, measuring the ancillary benefits of energy is a really important agenda. We need to move beyond the anecdotal evidence and more towards the quantitative evidence when we talk about ancillary benefits. So when we think about energy as an SDG, what it really means is that rather than being an end unto itself, energy is an input to human beings' needs and to their economy. So in other words, energy enhances our human physical well-being, but also powers our economies. So this is an essential input to the human existence. But however, as we've developed industrial scale energy over the last 200 or so years, that's led to very serious consequences at a planetary scale, which we all know about. So I don't need to describe those to you further. But when we transition to sustainable energy, we start to address those challenges. So we have a particular bind that we're in. We need the modern energy to keep our economies going and keep our lifestyle, but we don't want the negative impacts. So sustainable energy is a resolution to that particular bind that we find ourselves in. So it addresses the challenge and generates a lot of co-benefits. And if we look at SDG 7 with its three pillars of energy justice, energy efficiency, renewables, it's actually got more linkages across the other sustainable goals than any other SDG I can think of. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. But how do we measure these either at the national? Oh, sure, I'll speed up. So how do we measure these either at the national level or the regional level? So here's a quick picture, which I don't expect you to digest, but this is just showing you the three targets of SDG 7 and how they link to the myriad of other sustainable development goals across the human development and the economic spectrum. So when we think about these co-benefits or ancillary benefits, how do we account for them in national policy settings? This is very challenging. A couple of reasons. And on the right-hand side, I've listed just off the top of the head some of the co-benefits that I can see from renewable energy. You guys can probably think of many more. But indeed, the policy owners of these benefits might be sitting in different ministries. And many of these don't appear in business models because they're what we call uncosted externalities, and others are difficult to quantify because we don't have the methodologies. So in conclusion, I think we've demonstrated that SDG 7 is a mixed bag across the Asia Pacific. We have progress in some areas, but other areas where we need serious acceleration. But within each of these targets, I think there are a lot of different issues that we need to unpick, and this is where evaluation helps us. We need to understand the national dynamics. We need to go deeper than the indicators and what the indicators tell us. And as I've just pointed out, we have all of these interlinkages and ancillary benefits that need to be understood more completely so that we can build comprehensive cases to decision makers about why to invest in sustainable energy. And then, of course, what's preventing us from building those narratives are the data gaps and measurement limitations. And this is an area where hopefully we can work together on. And I look forward to your questions and the ability to shed some more light on these topics. So with that, I close and hand the floor back to Nina. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really a lot to digest there, but really helpful to give us that context of how we're tracking and that wide range of benefits. I really like that slide with all the interconnections with other SDGs. Really makes us think there's a lot more going on here than we necessarily capture in our usual studies. So thank you for that. I think what we'll do is hold questions until our discussion session at the end. I see we've got one in the chat. I think we'll take that at the end because I want to move on to introducing our next speaker. Her name is Divya Gur. I'm just going to put up her title there so you can all see that. So Divya is a social impact leader working towards positive socio-economic change and environmental changes at the grassroots level through data-driven research. Divya is representing the Council on Energy, Environment and Water today. CU, I'm wondering if that's how you guys use the acronym, but anyway, so that's based in India. Divya is part of the Powering Livelihoods program, which is a CU Grow initiative, and she leads monitoring, learning and evaluation within the program. Further, in her role, she also looks into strategizing for gender inclusivity, market accessibility, and state partnerships to scale up the adoption of decentralized renewable energy livelihood technologies across India. Previously, Divya worked at Sattva Consulting as a social impact consultant on the impact measurement and advisory team. At Sattva, she evaluated multiple development programs across thematic areas using a holistic approach to drive evidence-based decision-making among stakeholders. So we love all of that. I'm really excited for you to hear about the work Divya and her team have been doing in terms of measuring a wider set of impacts. She's going to share their approach to and insights from measuring impact by taking a 360-degree lens that comprises economic, social, gender, and environmental impacts. So with that, I will hand over to Divya.
That you wanted to meet Coco Gauff. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nina. I'll just put up my slides.
But also, she's so young.
Go for it.
You know, I guess
I hope you can see my slides.
Yes.
Oh, great. So first of all, thank you so much to you, Nazir, Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific Network, GLOCAL, for the opportunity to present our work on clean energy for livelihoods. It is also a very opportune day as we celebrate World Environment Day today to be discussing this topic. And as we saw in Michael's slides, where I mean, while there is some progress, but I think there is a lot more progress that needs to be done, especially when it comes to access to energy. While we've made significant strides in enabling access to energy, however, access to reliable energy, wherein the uninterrupted electricity supply still remains a challenge in a lot of rural and remote areas. And that impacts the productivity of more than 100 million farmers and micro entrepreneurs in India, as per what we estimated. So this is where productive use of renewable energy can have significant impact, can improve productivity of the farmers and micro entrepreneurs and enhance their livelihoods. But before we dive deep into the today's talk, I would like to quickly introduce CEEW, that's how we call it at our end. and the work we do. So at CEW, we are impacting sustainability at scale through data integrated analysis and strategic outreach. We are Asia's leading think tank, and we're a thriving team of 300 plus, and we're headquartered in New Delhi. And our work is broadly categorized into 3 pillars. Transformation, where we are working towards greening or improving efficiency of the major sectors such as driving low carbon economy, improving efficiency of power markets, or driving industrial sustainability, which in turn drive India's economic growth and take us closer to the target of achieving net zero by 2070. Then the second pillar is, and there also we strive to improve the quality of life, which affects the common people, just by enabling cleaner air to breathe, or shifting towards sustainable ways of cooling or transportation. To make these 2 pillars happen, we have the third pillar, which is enabler, where our research focuses on how the finance will flow to achieve the outcomes that are emphasized towards transformation and improving quality of life. We also have 4 special initiatives, one of them being powering livelihoods, about which I will talk in the upcoming slide. So powering livelihoods is a result of a research that CEW did a few years back, and which I also spoke of some numbers, wherein we found that more than 100 million farmers and micro entrepreneurs are constrained in their productivity because of the unreliable electricity supply, especially at the farm gates. So this results in output loss, as well as it affects the well-being, because the livelihoods that are there, they're largely manual. And even if they're mechanized, they operate on not so energy efficient machines, or they use diesel, etc., to cover the interrupted power supply. Also, because they're manual in nature, so it also involves significant amount of drudgery. This is where pure technologies, and as per what our research estimates, can enhance about 37 million livelihoods in India. So to drive this transformation, we came up with Powering Livelihoods, which is a sectoral initiative to mainstream productive use renewable energy technologies, especially in rural and remote areas. And the program is uniquely designed to work towards building the manufacturing ecosystem, or supporting the social enterprises that are manufacturers of these technologies through capital support, technical assistance, and market linkages, and then leveraging this enterprise growth to drive the ecosystem acceleration, wherein the evidence generation and dissemination comes in, which is significantly helpful in unlocking the support of policymakers, financiers, rural last mile distributors, and livelihood practitioners. And this evidence helps in unlocking the commercial market-driven ecosystem that we envisage for such technologies, such that these technologies are mainstreamed into the livelihood activities in rural India, and also they are self-sustaining in the long run. Gender inclusion has been an explicit focus throughout the program, and all the strategies or the activities that we do, there is an angle to gender inclusion, and about 1/3 of our program targets are dedicated towards gender inclusion. Since its inception in 2020, PL Powering Livelihood has enabled 12,000 plus technology deployments, and that has helped enhance more than 20,000 livelihoods, of which 72% are women. As a part of our work in policy, we have been closely working with Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to come up with a dedicated policy on adoption of productive use of renewable energy, which is one of its kind in the world. Powering Livelihoods is a joint initiative, as Nina also spoke of. We work with WillGrow here. WillGrow is more than a decade-old social enterprise incubator, which in this program works on enterprise acceleration part, leveraging their expertise. CEW, as a research think tank, looks into the ecosystem acceleration. So moving on, so evidence generation and dissemination is core to theory of change of powering livelihoods, because we are trying to unlock support for a nascent sector where the technologies are less known, the impact has not been established yet, the viability is not understood very well among the ecosystem stakeholders. Therefore, evidence generation is a crucial part of what we do, because we use this evidence to build sectoral momentum among, like I stated before, policymakers at national and subnational levels, such as Ministry of New and Renewable Energy or Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, etc., to build the confidence among them on the impact of these technologies and affordability of these technologies, such that the programs or the initiatives or the schemes that are designed by these ministries, these are informed and these look to scale the adoption of pure tech. To measure this impact, we look at it holistic, we generate holistic evidence so that as they design these policies, they also look into the, apart from just economic benefits, they're also looking into social and environmental benefits. So far within Powering Livelihoods program, we have generated this evidence with a sample of more than 1,500 plus users across more than 19 states in India for 8 different kinds of pure technologies. So first, we will delve into the pathways to enable economic impact for pure. Here, the key research question is that how technology usage over time results in change of net annual income. It depends on multiple factors and varies as per the technology. And when I say 8 pure technologies, so these technologies are like a micro solar pump or a solar dryer, a silk reeling machine, which helps in making yarn, silk yarn through cocoons, or these could be solar dehydrators, or these could also be solar powered DC refrigerator or deep freezers, biomass powered cold storages. So these are the kind of technologies we are talking about. And all of these technologies, they have varied impacts. And so we have listed down the factors through which people measure their economic impact. So the first one being improved productivity. So through the integration of pure technology, how the change in output has happened per unit of time. Then additional productive time. So earlier they were just taking an example of a solar pump. Earlier there would be reduced cropping cycles because largely it would be through rain-fed irrigation, and now the cropping cycles would have increased since the procurement of the pump. Or since the output is faster, they're able to work for more number of days in a year. So that results in additional productive time. Then the other factor that we're looking at is savings in fuel or electricity. By moving to solar powered application, they are able to save money on diesel and electricity bills. Through procurement of certain technologies, there are also new revenue streams that come up. That is that the end user can also start to sell additional products, or can also start processing other additional value-added products, which we'll also get into later when we take an example. Then through the use of machine, there is also improved quality, which fetches a better price. Now, these are the factors that result in higher income, annual income through the integration of technology. To understand the net change in the annual income, we also look at the things which are a cost to the end user, which is essentially the EMI that they pay towards financing the technology, and also the OPEX that they incur towards operations. So taking these together, adding the ones that result in increased income and subtracting the ones that are a cost to the end user, we get to net change in the annual income. We'll understand this better by taking an example of a micro solar pump. And to simplify it further, we'll take reference of a user. So on the right of our screens, we have Bahuri Devi. She is a farmer from Gumla district in Jharkhand, and she earlier used to depend on rain-fed irrigation or had to lease a pump in need, which would largely depend on the availability of the pump and also the price of leasing it. Then Bauri Devi procured micro solar pump through the support of a local NGO there. And through the use of this pump, Bauri Devi could increase her productivity. There were higher yields due to increased irrigation. There were additional cropping cycles moving from 1 to 3 times a year. And she could also save on the fuel or electricity, the money that she was spending on diesel or leasing the pump. And if the user has taken the pump on financing, then about $16 of EMI reduction initially for 1.5 years, period of 1.5 years, and considering the OPEX as well, together results into the net additional income of about 25,000 INR or $300. Taking another example of solar dryer, this is Maleshwarma from Kadapa district, Andhra Pradesh. It is a woman-led FPO. Earlier, they would just be able to sell fresh produce at whatever price they could get. But then they procured a solar dryer on finance. And now they are able to also sell value-added products, which are essentially dried products. And because of the procurement of solar dryer, they have been able to have a new revenue stream, which is the dried product. And also the quality of the dried product is high because this is a dried faster. It is also protected. So the quality, the color, etc. is retained. And it also avoids the dust that comes in. So together, looking at EMI deduction, OPEX, etc., together, Maleshwarma and other women in the FPO are able to earn a net additional income of 36,000 INR or $400. So this is how we have looked into the pathways to measure economic impact. But productive use of renewable energy have many social benefits as well beyond just economic impact. And to measure these social benefits of pure tech, we have looked at it in 3 levels. One is self, household, and community, and these happen over a period of time. So at self, what we have looked at is the end user who's using the technology. So there is an increase in self-confidence because there is greater assurity of the income due to reliable energy source for their livelihood activity. There is also improved resilience. So overall, there is an increase in confidence. Social capital, because now they are, like some of them are also first-time earners through the integration of the technology. So especially for the first-time earners, once they start earning, etc., they gain larger social capital. They're able to participate in community events. And also community also comes to them and ask in terms of what is this machine, what is this technology, can we also take it up, etc., resulting in a larger social capital. Then decision-making agencies, especially in case of women, and the ones which are marked are especially we measure for women. So once they start earning an income, they are also part of decision-making process within the household. Then with the use of these technologies, they're also gaining new skills and knowledge, especially the ones which are becoming micro-entrepreneurs or nano-entrepreneurs through the integration of these machines. We also look at the other impacts, which is that one, which I also stated earlier, that because of the mechanization of the livelihood activity, there is reduced drudgery. And in interest of time, I can give you a very quick example. And I will just go back to this, go to this slide. You can see here Puni Deri, and she's a master silk reeler from Odisha, Keonjhar district. Earlier, as a practice of silk reeling, she would do it through thigh reeling, wherein there would be cuts on her thigh. Now, once the machine, once she got the machine, she has now been using the machine to make the yarn. So that drudgery is reduced. Similarly, in case of Neetu Tandon, who's in the middle here in the picture, is a micro-entrepreneur from Agra, Uttar Pradesh, wherein she procured this multi-purpose food processor. A large part of her work before would involve manual pulping, etc., which would also involve drudgery and also take a lot more time. Due to integration of this machine, she has now been able to fasten the process and also reduce the drudgery. So these are some examples of women whose livelihoods have been enhanced and the drudgery has been reduced. Going back to social impact, then at the household level, we are looking at economically productive family members. Through our field work or data collection, we have also found out that there are also others in the family which help the user in operating the machine. In some cases, it's the wives who support the husband in operating the machine. So they are also in that process learning how to work on the machine and able to generate an income. In some cases, it's also the son, the daughter, who also helps them in using the machine. They're also able to access
just 1 minute left, please.
Yeah, and also with the increased income, there is also investment in quality of life. Social impact, so far we've been measuring through perception-based responses, but we also capture case studies which I just now presented to validate and to capture real life cases of using these technologies and also experiencing social benefits. The program also measures environmental impact, and in interest of time, I will quickly take you through on how it is. Again, it varies as per the technology. So for example, in case of micro solar pump, what we're looking at is essentially the avoidance of fossil fuel or grid electricity. And as per our analysis, it shows that about 1 kg of CO2 per day is saved when replaced with micro solar pump. And also, again, similarly, in case of solar dryer, we are looking at the reduced food loss that happens because of the solar dryer. And in that, we estimate about 2.5 kg of CO2 per day is saved from avoided food loss. And there is also methodology, detailed methodology, which probably if my colleague Priyatam is on the call, can share the links with you. We also do, we've also estimated affordability and end user impact insights combined with affordability have been very insightful in the work that we do with policymakers and financiers to build in the schemes and especially the financial instruments to enable affordable access to credit. And I'll very quickly take you through the approach that we have. And this is largely based on the secondary research that we do on technology specifications, but we also bring in the income data that we get from end user impact assessment to understand the payback period and the total cost of ownership. So affordability is being looked at from 3 aspects. One is the capex of pure solutions. So these technologies are perceived to be having higher upfront cost, which leads to the initial adoption barrier. Then we also look at discounted payback period. That is that whether the additional income from pure justifies the investment that is being made. Then we've also compared these technologies to their conventional alternative to understand what is the total cost of ownership vis-a-vis the alternatives. The lower the TCO, higher is the likelihood of adoption. So if you look at this graph very quickly, so we see that lower the product cost, lower is the payback period, and likely it will have greater traction. So for example, self-healing machine, it has a lower product cost and lower payback period. So its deployments are likely to be in hundreds or thousands. With respect to cold storage, which is a high cost solution and with a high payback period, the deployments are likely to be lower and will need some kind of financing to increase the adoption of the solution. Similarly, in terms of TCO, what we found out is that most of the DRE or pure technologies are viable as compared to their alternatives, except for self-healing machine or Charka. And finally, how we are using this analysis to inform financiers and policymakers is that as the value of the product increases, you will see that the ownership varies and also the kind of financier that is there to finance the technology also varies along with the loan tenure. So for the lower product cost technologies, largely it's individual ownership and it will be financed through MFIs or self-help group loans. Where as the product cost starts increasing, we see more of shared ownership or community ownership, largely in case of cold storages where we will see FPOs procuring it. And the financing source will be bank loans, NBFCs, etc. So that's about it on the insights that we have. Of course, we have many learnings from the ground on how to measure impact and how these insights can be, integrated into the policy making or the financing instruments or to scale up the adoption of these technologies. I think the one major learning is that one approach does not fit all. These are different types of technologies, and we have to look into the distinct context that they have, which influence its usage and income impact. And of course, in terms of these technologies being very nascent on the ground, so whenever you are taking up evaluation of Pure, there is very much the need in terms of the training has to be very rigorous and questions have to be as simple as possible. So thank you so much for the opportunity. As Michael said, we also do not have all the answers. We're also learning. Suggestions, questions, all are welcome at this moment for us to build our research further. And but as we move forward, we aim to generate evidence for more technologies, create frameworks and tools which will help the Pure sector measure impact effectively and inform sector's growth driven by evidence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya. So much in that story. It's really exciting to hear the sorts of data that you're collecting through that project. So thank you for sharing. So now we can move into the question and answer part of the event. So do feel free to put your questions in the chat. We had a couple of questions come through already. Let me see, I've just lost the chat. But I'll bring it back. Okay. So we had a question from Arya Tripathi, and perhaps this is, either of you can jump in and answer this. Perhaps Michael would like to start. So you're asking effectively, are we measuring the life cycle costs of electricity and internet access in the sense that are we capturing the fact that much of the electricity in the Asia Pacific region is still fossil fuel based? I hope I've understood the question correctly there, but would either of you like to have a go at answering that?
I can have a try to start, Nina, if that's okay. I think it's a thought-provoking question. I mean, obviously, energy is used to produce goods and services, and some of those goods and services can be very energy intensive. And of course, not all are consumed in the same country. Many of them are exported. So if we think about aluminium as a case in point, all right, so we produce aluminium that uses a huge amount of electricity, and aluminium sometimes called solid electricity, and that's exported. Similarly, you know, we have other sorts of services. We look at the IT system. Centers consume a lot of energy, and they can be located anywhere in the world. But what we tend to see is that when we're talking about new energy systems, so new power capacity, the cheapest new power capacity right now is renewables. So on the data center side, many of the data centers are located in places where they can run off renewable energy because that is cheaper and more sustainable. That is a positive trend, I suppose, in that sense. One thing that would solve it straight away is if we had a universal carbon price. So what that means is that if we were to price carbon, we would make the dirty electricity more expensive, and therefore the companies that are looking to produce energy-intensive goods and services, they would move automatically to places where the energy is cheaper and cleaner. So that would be one solution. But I think it is an important question, like about border adjustments. And as we get deeper into climate change emissions mitigations, these questions of border adjustments of carbon will become much more relevant. So hopefully that's made a start at least to answer it.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. I've got a question I'd like to throw in. This one perhaps for Divya. So it was really interesting to see the wide range of social impacts that you're measuring in your project. And you mentioned that you're using perception-based data for that. So we know that traditionally decision makers prefer to have objective, concrete, monetizable metrics. So my question, I guess, is what scope do you think there is to further quantify or monetize those? Or do you think that's necessary at all? Is it more appropriate to stay with the perception-based measures? And I guess in that case, what do you think is the level of acceptance for around the robustness of that approach?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, for this question. I'd say in an ideal case scenario, of course, the best is, quantified measure, and also if you're able to monetize on it, if you're able to use proxies, right? And we've had these discussions internally as well. But however, in case of pure, because these are different technologies, right? And each has its own use case. So to develop such an approach in case of social benefits, it will take a lot more nuanced approach. Like you'll have to look at each technology, understand the benefits, and then work into that. And now that depends on the objective, how deep you want to go for each technology, right? So that's my answer. And also in our case, what I would say is that it also needs, like, you need to have that much data as well, because I will tell you, like, for an example, like solar dryer, right? So the economic impact or the income earned, or not just the economic impact, the use case of, let's say, drying rose petals versus, let's say, lemons will be totally different. Or let's say it differs value chain wise also. Same would be in case of refrigerator, etc., right? So that requires a lot more detailed approach and also a lot more data. Right now, the deployments itself are limited to hundreds, right? So there isn't enough also the sample or population on ground to be able to measure social benefits that way. But as the sector progresses, they get more mainstream, and we are able to develop, like we have enough evidence, enough sample across value chains. I think we will be able to evolve our approach in that sense. On the part where stakeholders value this, from my experience, what stakeholders value the most is hearing from the end user themselves what is their experience of using the technology. This is where case stories, real life cases from ground, they work the best. And as a part of our program, we have created videos, we have captured these case studies. We have also enabled public platforms for our users to be able to connect with these national and subnational level policymakers as well, to share their experience and to also hear from them. So I would say equally the qualitative data works, and it is very much essential to include.
Right. Thank you for that. Yeah, evaluation stories, right? Those real stories still have huge value. That's great to hear. So I've got one more question. I put this one to Michael, I think. And again, everybody feel free to pitch any other questions into the chat or raise your hand. But in the interim, Michael, so you mentioned that, we're making good progress on renewable energy access, and that actually we need to start focusing more on looking at the quality and reliability of that access. So can you say a bit more about the sort of issues that you're seeing arise there?
Yeah, I guess when SDG 7 was framed, they were looking for maybe like a Boolean indicator, like a 0 or a 1, as you might say in mathematics. Does a household have electricity or not? And this was how the target was set, because amidst the complexity of all of the other things we're trying to measure in SDG 7, that was the best way. But the experience on the ground is that, somebody might be a tick on somebody's survey sheet saying, yes, we have electricity, When you look a little bit deeper, it might be that they don't have a great capacity. There's not a lot of watts of electricity available to them, which means that certain end uses are not possible. They might not have enough of a strong connection for cooking, for example, which is a really important end use. And by the way, electric cooking is one of the big emerging solutions for clean cooking. On top of that, you might have a reliability problem, either in terms of voltage fluctuation, or it might be that that particular village is off supply for a couple of hours per day. So we really need to get a little bit deeper and look into this. And the World Bank has got a tier system, tier 1 through to tier 5, which describes the level of electricity access. So as we get towards this 100% number, the message is that we're not going to sit back and take it easy and say mission accomplished. It's really a question of saying, looking at those people, what tier are they on? Are they on tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, etc.? And how can we improve outcomes? And one of the things that we're doing now, actually, with the clean cooking programs is going to villages and saying, okay, would this village be ready for an electric cooking program? Do we have 2.5 kilowatts of capacity in each house? That would mean some cases rewiring, and in other cases, the local transformers of distribution would need to be upgraded. Because when we look at development outcomes, the more developed people are, the more electricity they use, because electricity is, I guess, an indicator showing that to what extent people have access to income generating opportunities and all of the great things that Divya described. So what we need to do is put in place the conditions where people have access to that electricity so they can uplift themselves economically and get better services. I think that's the area that we will be looking at much more closely post 2030.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Michael. And thank you to Divya as well. We've reached the end of our time for this webinar, but it's been a really rich sharing of information. So thank you very much. And thank you to the participants. I wanted to make a plug for some other, this conversation is building on a previous conversation we had last month, which looked at a New Zealand example of measuring wider benefits. So I would direct you to our website if you want to look into that example a little bit further, anybody on the call. But otherwise, we'll close by just our usual request to share your feedback on the webinar. That's always, as evaluators, of course, we want to find out how it went. So please do that. We'll put the link in the chat and circulate it by email afterwards. I'm sharing this because Nazir's internet is not working well, but he will be hosting with other steering committee members another workshop in July. This is a one-on-one on energy evaluation, and you can also look out for our newsletter that will be coming out in July as well. But with that, I will draw the webinar to close. Thank you very much to our esteemed speakers and also to our participants. We really enjoyed bringing you together today, and I hope this will inspire some thinking amongst you all and perhaps some new areas of work. So with that, go well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.